All right. Then welcome everybody to today's webinar. Before Dan from Mega will start and get us kicked off with all the good content, just some background info for today's host. I am Karsten Voges. I'm the CEO of Lean42, and we are a consulting company based out of Munich, also operating in the US, across Europe. And I myself do a lot of EA IT strategy consulting for 20 plus years. And today hosting with me is Jean. Short intro.
So I'm the meta mother, and I lead the U.S. office, and also do work over in Europe. Same thing, doing this, standing up EA, implementing EA, practice, doing research and speaking and writing in this industry for way over 20 years, which I probably should update that. It should be 30 years. But anyway, yeah, we're here to, host a series of really cool experts in our industry and to grow the community. So that's what this webinar is all about on LinkedIn. And thank you guys for coming.
All righty. And just two more words to Lean42. We're CIO advisory. We bring really lean, agile methodologies but we do management strategy, consulting, enterprise IT architecture, but also the information security, compliance, governance, risk controls areas. And everywhere we help with like the setup or maturing your practice. It's also something for a lot of organizations. We run EA as a service. We help stand it up, set it up, and have lots of like tools there. We do this across many industries, many sectors, and we do have a conference coming up in June next year in Munich for IT leaders. The recording of today and all the other sessions that we do publicly is also available in our Lean Academy, so very easy to sign up there and also follow us on demand. We do have a few events also coming up soon. We have one for how to govern your artificial intelligence, kind of like a breakout from today's sessions. So how to like do that from an EA function perspective. We have kind of like something around lean and agile. And we do have a webinar coming up on security strategies. So that already covers like a lot of the areas that we also do from consulting point of view. Last word, we also do have a newsletter where you get kind of like all the information of these events. So sign up so you get kind of like the latest and greatest of that as well. So that was a very quick run through what we at Lean42 do, because we do not want to hold off too much from you guys. That we have a very special guest today, Dan Hebda from Mega is joining us, and we're very good partners with Mega, yes, and we're very happy to do this joint webinar. It's a follow-up from our last week's or 2 weeks ago LinkedIn Live session. We did also had like a business breakfast with like Peter Brunnenberg in Munich a couple months ago. So Dan, do you want to share? Do you want to introduce yourself? The floor is yours.
Perfect, thank you. So happy to be here. Excited to discuss elements of enterprise architecture and the intersection between AI and EA. Just for those who don't know me, my name is Dana Hebda. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Mega, and I've been in the EA space myself for over 20 years as well. And let me just kind of jump right into it. Let's get started and hopefully have some fun discussing some of the new techs and trends. What I did in this presentation, just to set the context and the stage, is I injected an element that we had quickly mentioned at the end of last week's session, which is that not only do we need to focus on the technology, but in the value of EA and where then AI, of course, can support it. So for today's presentation, I am going to start with some concepts around enterprise architecture value and show how that drives some of our decisioning as to what AI we include or not. And then also we'll flip it and talk a little bit about how EA can support AI. The first thing, though, to begin with is that AI and EA, they face a common problem or challenge. And I'm quoting here from a very recent Harvard Business Review article. And one of the areas is that artificial intelligence programs have been struggling and in some cases failing because they weren't focused on business outcomes. They were focused too much on technology, too much on the shiny new thing, kind of proving or adapting whatever was buzzing without really contemplating if it generally supported the future direction of the business. Now, for those in enterprise architecture, that should sound familiar because enterprise architecture practices often struggle from that same lack of focus on business outcomes. So again, I'm going to start the presentation with a little bit of conversation on the business outcome focus, and then we'll dive into some of the really cool tech aspects of EA and AI. A quick quote from Gartner just showing real need to link strategy to outcomes and think of your EA practice as an internal management consultancy. So to hear Lean 42 offering EA as a service is very exciting, very cool. And I look forward to learning more about that because it does play very much in the value delivery model of successful enterprise architecture. Now, whenever I discuss enterprise architecture with broad audiences, often the question of what is enterprise architecture comes up. And I prefer to change the question of why enterprise architecture to get more towards that value that I've mentioned. And so in the why enterprise architecture frame, I use a definition that I call an umbrella statement, meaning a high level statement that all of the services you offer should fit within. So, for example, the purpose of enterprise architecture, why enterprise architecture, is to align enterprise execution. You could think of that as the operating model by design to the company strategy. Now, in order to do that, of course, there are many dimensions to enterprise architecture. We could have business models, we could have technology views, data, etc. But in order to deliver value, we have to be sure that the work the architects are doing really move the company forward in the direction of the strategy. And in order to do that as an EA practice, you should articulate the EA services that your organization is offering, that your practice is offering. So a few common examples: app rationalization, operating model design, of course, data governance and risk management. But more and more, we've seen interest in capability, and related to data governance is data support to help enable AI initiatives. And we'll speak to that as the EA for AI section of the presentation. Just for more illustration of the need to focus on business outcomes, for the last 2 years, the hype cycle for Gartner EA has really moved more and more towards business and business outcome focus. And even within this list, which is focused on the business dimension, not including the technological dimension, you'll see that a number of the elements here can strongly benefit from the inclusion of artificial intelligence. For example, customer experience is one that's really trending with personalization from an AI perspective. So how do we determine that we really do offer value to our organization? And it's that we have to make sure that every EA practice delivers undeniable value. But I have a caveat: as recognized by stakeholders outside of EA. And this is really the key for success of an EA practice, is to ensure that you're checking with the audience that you're delivering value to, that they recognize that value. Now, in order to determine that, we have to ask ourselves, who is the value for? Because it's not typically for the architects themselves. Architecture is to move the business forward, enable transformation, implement new technologies and optimizations to match new customer expectations. But it's not usually that we're architecting for architect's sake. There's a group or a stakeholder audience. And at Mega, we have a framework developed by Peter Brunenberg from our German office we call noisy to influential. And noisy to influential are external assessments of the perspective of the EA practice. So if you're a new EA practice, let's say you have not yet delivered on any of the services, the organization maybe isn't completely clear exactly what does this EA practice do. They may see it as noise. They don't understand it. It's unclear. The value is not yet perceived. So very quickly, we want to move an EA practice in that early state to what we call useful. And in order to get to useful, this is where we're going to take those EA services that the practice offers, and we're going to look for a set of stakeholders who are willing to work with us, and we're going to push some of the work product that architects can produce to illustrate value in a way that we would call useful. We want them to recognize and say, you know what, I worked with that EA team. They delivered this type of product to me, and I found it useful. And as they do so, they'll start talking to other individuals throughout the organization. So the potential stakeholder set grows. And over time, as more people hear of the usefulness of EA, you'll get stakeholders coming to EA asking for help. Can you help me with this issue? Can you focus on this? Can you solve this problem for me? We call that pull mode because they're now requesting support from the EA practice. And this is where we're getting to the level of trusted. There's enough value perceived that stakeholders are coming to the EA practice requesting information. But at this point, it's still often problem resolution or it's something that's minimal in scope. And so, what we really want to get to is problem avoidance. And that's what we call influential. This is collaborative mode. This is where the stakeholders now, after working in a trusted capacity, now come to the architects and say, hey, I'm envisioning a new business model, a new product line, a new offering, a new technology. Can we work together to review the vision, lay out a blueprint or roadmap, and avoid potential problems before they occur? And that's really the target. Now, when you go from noisy to influential, it's not all stakeholders for all services all at the same time. Different stakeholders for different services at different paces. And so this actually gives you a way to assess your EA practice and plan for expansion and stabilizing the practice by targeting different stakeholders to highlight that value. So when we speak to that particular framework, one of the quick questions is, sounds great. How do I get started? Where do I find these stakeholders? How do I prove the value? And this is one that's interesting for enterprise architects as we tend to be more introverted or technologically focused. We have to get outside of our comfort zone, knock on doors, and start talking to different stakeholders and asking about the business. What are their needs? What are their challenges? Who has something that we can address that would be sufficiently visible, but also manageable so that we can deliver value in a reasonable time frame? You may get some pushback for those who have had a bad experience in the past with EA. And that's where that why EA aspect is so important. Because if you look at the services that EA offers, you can pitch the value of that specific service far more than pitching the value of general EA practice. And so really, really focus on that and then market your successes. When you deliver value and it's recognized, be sure the EA practice does get full credit for it. This is the common pitfall we see. Even the most successful EA practices, if they hand off their work product, for example, to project execution teams, then everything goes smoothly. The project execution team in the PMO office get a lot of the credit, and sometimes it's not clear the role that the architects played. So be sure to brand your work, market your successes, speak to value. It's huge. I mentioned at the bottom of this slide, it's a reminder for a story that I have. It's a true story. About a year and a half ago, I was giving a similar presentation to this one at an EA event. And the architect came up to me at the end of the session and he said, hey, I've got a question. I've identified the stakeholder. I've been working with the stakeholder. I deliver a work product every month, and every month they discard it without using it. They don't see value. I don't know what to do. I'm worried about the success of the EA practice. And so my first question, of course, is what did the stakeholder indicate was missing? Where was the gap? Why weren't they seeing value? What were they looking for that they were missing? And the individual responded that they hadn't thought to ask the stakeholder that yet. So they were looking for answers in the technology and in the EA space to other architects when really they needed to have that conversation with the business stakeholder to see what it was that they were missing. Now I mentioned expanding on the EA practice. And so one of the things I suggest as you look at your EA practice, and again, I'm very excited to hear about Lean 42's EA as a service perspective, that you can understand then the EA capabilities that you need to deliver on specific EA services and assess those capabilities. So a quick illustration, it's a very high level and general one, is if I were to pursue, for example, a rationalized application portfolio. Let's say that's the EA service that I wanted to start with. It's quite simple, it's got high value, it's something we can move towards quickly. But to do it right is not just about technology inventories and life cycles, it's having a business perspective to rationalize the application or the technologies against. And so if I don't have an EA capability to establish, manage, and maintain a business capability model, you could frame it as a business architecture capability, then I will fail at that particular service. And if that's really where I think I have traction because I've got stakeholders, I've got a need, then I need to understand how I can fulfill that capability. Perhaps I reach out to a firm like Lean 42 to supplement and augment my abilities, or I could take some training. I could hire somebody who has the skill, but I would need that in order to successfully rationalize the app portfolio. So if we understand the abilities of the EA practice and we understand the value-oriented services we're looking to offer, we can look at these intersections and use it to plan expansion. So again, if I establish that ability to determine and manage a business capability model, I can now say, now what else can I do now that I have this business capability model, this living model? Well, I can perform capability assessments. I could offer that as a service. How well is this part of the business running? I could help with transformation prioritization. So this is one of the elements that a lot of companies struggle with is so many things are needing to change so rapidly that choosing which one to focus on when is difficult. But if you frame it in the context of an assessed business capability model, the architects can give a vision for which have the highest priority and should be changed in which sequence or order. So you can really expand the EA service catalog by looking at the capabilities you possess as well as looking at the services you're looking to offer and ensure there's alignment. And when there's a gap that you need to fulfill, again, that could be training, hiring, or working with partners to bring in that skill set so you can successfully deliver the service. Some of the new trends to explore, just generally speaking, in terms of EA services, sustainability, of course, continues to trend and is growing. And that can be simplistic from the perspective of portfolio identification of zombie applications that are just running out there in the background, not used, not needed. Let's find those and within alignment to data regulations, maybe shut them down. But also we could do architectural assessments of the products that we utilize in our architecture and which ones have vendors and or the products themselves that have a good sustainability track record. Security, another key element that looking at the aspect of data and what needs to be protected. What are the patterns or templates for security that enable that protection? Data governance, which we'll speak to a little bit more in the context of AI, because that's going to be a key one for enterprise architecture support of AI. And then, of course, AI support in general, looking for that pursuit of artificial intelligence. All right, so with value in mind, let's jump into the AI for EA first. And I'll try to say it out because the letters can be a mouthful. But the first thing is to focus that our vision for artificial intelligence in enterprise architecture is augmentation. This is a blog by our lead data scientist, Ava, and we're highlighting some of the things that we're looking to support and use artificial intelligence for. But the goal truly is augmentation. How can we increase the capabilities of the architects? And that might be in insights, analytics, speed. There's a number of factors, but we're looking to augment them to really strengthen their ability, going back to that mission statement earlier, so that every enterprise architecture practice can deliver recognizable value from those outside of the EA practice itself. So we've decided to take an interesting approach. There's an enterprise architect individual, Sam Holzman, and he has an interesting view on AI. And the notion is that the AI engines, the technology are good, but in many cases the data is bad, meaning be careful. You can't trust, for example, all of the results of generative AI or all of the results of any of the AI. You have to know what it was trained on, how it was trained, and move in that direction. And I'm going to come back to this slide a little bit later when we talk about enterprise architecture for artificial intelligence. But because of this challenge of data, What we're doing at Mega is we're taking the approach to, for the moment, manage and maintain our own data. So we're really setting up and training and looking over, manicuring, and establishing information that we trust, that we've vetted, so that the results have the highest degree of accuracy. Now, it will be done in conjunction with broader data sets, and as we refine it over time, we'll get more and more broad with more and more control in terms of the quality and accuracy of data. But what you'll see in a moment in some of the feature functionality, if I look at categorization, classification of technologies as business applications or not, that's data we're managing and procuring and maintaining and designing ourselves. And we're offering a feedback loop. So clients, if they disagree with the assessment, can let us know, obviously in a technological manner, and then we can retrain the aspect. As it comes to our AI assistant with generative capabilities, that's of course a mix. So we control the data as it relates to the documentation of our product set, some of the abilities to generate, for example, queries or draw insight from our product set. But as we get to the value of enterprise architecture in general or in conjunction with different fields, that's a combination today of our own data with a broader set of data that the generative AI is trained in the internet. And more, we're feeding it our own success stories, our own playbooks, our own value propositions, our own vision to increase the amount of accuracy and quality of the responses as it relates to our vision for EA. And we'll tone down or scale back some of the perspectives that are more general from the web itself. So some of the technologies, and I did bring some screenshots today. So last week we talked about, wanted to see what some of it looks like, but just to give a quick perspective on some of what we're about to walk through. So we have implemented smart assistants. This is where the tool will guide you and provide advice and direction based on the data in the repository. You'll see auto classification as part of what we call intelligent APM. And again, I've got some screenshots on that. We also are using generative AI in a few capabilities. So the first is, as you establish your application portfolio, we can get product descriptions from generative AI to seed the population of data and make it easier to understand what it is we're looking at, especially if I don't recognize the technology by name. Alignment, so proposing which business applications are likely to support which business capabilities, especially if you draw on capability models that are industry specific provided by Mega. We do have Hexa, and again, I've got some screenshots on this as well to show the chat assistant, the generative AI, and some of the ways in which it responds to your questions. And then in the background, so nothing to show visually speaking, but using AI to do root cause analysis and incident detection, both in terms of something that has occurred, but also increasingly to monitor the health and try to avoid something from occurring. So if I start with the smart assistant perspective, I've got two listed here. One's about cloud migrations, one's about Gartner's time analysis, where you determine if you want to tolerate, invest, migrate, or eliminate. And that's the one, the lower right. And so it looks through the details in the repository about those applications and or technologies. And based on the information, it will give you a proposed recommendation. And you can see again a few examples there with invest, migrate, eliminate. And it'll also give you a reliability score. And that way you can understand the degree of confidence in the basis of data that led to that decision. Ultimately, though, the architect makes the final decision. You can see that in the upper left in the cloud migration example, where the priority, you've got the high-low. That's a type of vision where architects can make decisions. And then ultimately, the final decision of do we take that approach for the cloud migration is again made by the architect, taking into account some of the data fed by the smart assistant, using AIs to look across the architectural data. So from a cloud migration perspective, for example, I might look on the degree of dependencies that the particular technology has to other technologies in the architecture. So if I do move it, what kind of adjustments do I need to make for the integrations that already exist, the data feeds that are required, and where are those technologies? Are they currently architected on-prem? Are they already in the cloud? I could look to assessments around business value and technological stability. We have partners that could even get down to a code scanning level to look to see the readiness of the technology to be in the cloud. And it can all be fed together to help the assistant provide a reliability score related to a recommendation so that you can accelerate this decision making in moving to the cloud. Another one that first, just to illustrate the way it works, intelligent APM automation. And so it's kind of three major steps discover technologies, that's using general discovery tools, but then the AI kicks in to take the products that are discovered and separate them into those that represent lower level technologies versus those that represent business applications. And then for those that represent business applications, proposing their alignment to business capability models. So the idea here is we have seen a number of organizations who look to begin their EA practice in the application portfolio management perspective. But in doing so, they get stuck first in manual efforts to collect data about their IT landscape, separate to then do their own analysis as to which of those technologies that they found belong in the business application versus technology buckets. And then again, establishing a capability model itself may take them some time, and then fitting all of those data. So here, using the AI and the intelligence, we're looking to really accelerate and take this for something that could take an organization, especially if they're staffed low, from a 1-2 year initiative to hopefully something that can deliver value in a matter of weeks. So here's a picture where I have a number of the discovered products at left. I've got here the vendor that's picked up through discovery. And I've got the recommendation set, and you can see it's got a confidence level or a rate that's specified. So I can pay more attention to, for example, one that's got only a 61% confidence. As an architect, I really want to make sure that looks accurate. And then on the right, you can see where I, the architect, will make the decision. Do I agree or not with the proposal? And the final determination is up to the architect. Now, of course, if you're looking at this and say, well, I might have thousands of technologies and do I have to go one by one? Of course, you can mass select, maybe sort by rate. And if something is in the 99 to 100% confidence rate, we might start with accepting the decision and be more discerning as we get to lower confidence levels. I also spoke to generative AI supporting descriptions. So you can see here the pop-up. It's giving me a description about the technology, and that description's coming from the generative AI. So as I find my products, I get this automated categorization classification by confidence that the architect decides against. And to help me make the decision, I also get data seeded from generative AI to give me a description about what that particular product or technology represents. Now you can see at the top, and I won't step through all of it. I'm trying to focus on the AI and not make this commercial, but we do go through several steps to refine the details that we have, that we take our business applications, we'll assign responsibilities, we'll preview what that looks like, and then apply it to the core data set. After that, we can go on to then the capability alignment perspective. So we can take what's now the business applications, and you can see in the middle here, we'll get proposals from the AI as to which capabilities it's likely that the particular applications are underpinning or support. And so, for example, I can see customer management, and it's proposed to align to a number of capabilities. And the product will then take that and visualize it for me to show me and highlight which are the proposed the applications that were discovered, that were categorized as business applications, and where the AI thinks they fit in terms of the business capability model. Similar to what I mentioned a moment ago, the architect makes the determination, so they can look at it and say, yes, that's correct, I agree, and then it accelerates or augments, again, the capacity of the enterprise architecture practice. But of course, if they see something that they do disagree with, they can reject the proposal, they can fit it as they see fit, and then move forward from there. I mentioned we are managing and procuring our own data to ensure high quality of this. We are working on an opt-in option where when an architect rejects the decisioning, they'll have the ability to share that feedback back, and then we can retrain and learn from much more exposure across the market. Another really cool one, and this one, it's a mix of value and also sort of exploring the realm of possible. And so it's 3 phases that I've depicted on a single slide here. But effectively, I can take a very conversational view of a particular, in this case, process. And you can see the request, draw the process diagram. I want swim lanes, I want certain details, and here's what's involved in the process. And so I can speak to it. Now it's labeled 1, 2, 3. I'm not even sure that was necessary. I could casually and conversationally describe the details of the process. The assistant will review those details, and then from there, it generates this particular BPMN model. We do have some cool intelligence in also auto diagram layout. And so if I prefer a different perspective, I can click a button up top of the screen. It will flip it in the other view. It's not a full complete process model. This isn't got all the details. It's just a way of accelerating, again, think augmentation, so that I don't have to start from scratch, that I can get something up and running quite quickly. Jumping into the generative AI, and apologies, the font's going to be quite small on this, but we can chat with the HopeX assistant. And it's very similar to what you would see with ChatGPT in terms of you're having conversational input. So again, apologies for the font, but it says, using BPA, the process product within HopeX, how can I connect an application to a business process? And then you can see, in order to connect an application to a process, here's what you would do. And it speaks to the different steps that you can do to connect, with a citation at the bottom to the particular product documentation that explains it further. So you could take the generative answer, which gives you clear step-by-step instructions, and you could also refer to the citation if you wanted to read further about that topic. You can see here, I put a few more examples. How do I create a business capability map? And again, I can get step-by-step instructions, including citations along the bottom, so that I can quickly find the information I was looking for. I put these screenshots in here in particular because there was a question last week saying, there's a lot of documentation about the EA tools and products. Will you be using the generative AI to assist in that? And so here's an illustration of, yes, exactly how that works. And then if I wasn't sure, say, hey, is there a view where the product can render a capability map for me? And sure, here's how you would get there, taken from existing data, go through the following steps, and again with a citation. So really cool way of accelerating the ability to get direction on the documentation to better understand elements of the product. When you look at this screen in particular, speaking to step-by-step instructions, this is data that's trained on our own documentation. And so if we do get feedback and or find issues in the explanation, we know the data, we can go correct it in the data, retrain the AI, and improve the quality of the responses. We're going to expand that into other directions. At the moment, this depiction will be a little bit of a hybrid. It's going to take some of the data that we have under strong control, but it's also going to incorporate data that it has from the web. And over time, this is the area where I mentioned we'll expand some of that control by feeding it our own success stories, our own methods, our own views, so that it really provides pointed, even if general, direction. So in this case, what are some of the ways in which enterprise architecture can support artificial intelligence programs? So I figured for today's presentation, I might as well put in a question about exactly what we're going to talk about. And so we can see here that it lists some of the ways that we would do that. We would identify business capabilities that can benefit from AI. We would look at some of the measurements. We would also go through and look at some of the transformation and data perspectives as well. I could ask it to elaborate, just to say, be more thorough. And sure, it breaks it out into more ways and information about how EA could support AI. Again, if there is a relevant citation, it provides it. Of course, in certain cases, there may not be a relevant citation, and we would just give the answer. And then last, what about data? Does the contextualization of data in EA offer a benefit to an AI program? So yes, and again, explains how that's the case. So very powerful, very cool elements in terms of that perspective. And I'll go through this part a little bit quickly because I want to jump into the EA for AI. But the last was about incorporating data governance. And I put a little test. The Zachman framework, especially 10 to 15 years ago, I ran into a lot of prospects where they had this notion of trying to fill in each cell. Is an improper use of the framework. So I figured, let me ask a question that the real answer should be no, because all my previous questions, it seems as though the AI was just agreeing with me. Can you do this? Yes. Should you do this? Yes. Well, let me flip it around. If I were to use the Zachman framework, should I focus on filling in each cell? And again, it comes back with no, the framework's not intended as a checklist, and it gives you some explanation on the better ways to use it. Just to be clear, I'm not in this moment promoting or not the Zachman framework. It's just an illustration of a trap that EAs had fallen into in the past, and I was curious to see the AI's response. All right, now let's flip gears. Enterprise architecture for artificial intelligence. Let's get and see what we can do here. So first goes back to what I had mentioned from the Harvard Business Review quote, and now an interesting notion, and it's from even 2 years ago. So the quote's a little bit old that I typically like to use, but in this case, I found it interesting because it's sort of predicting the problem that the current Harvard Business Review quote mentioned is now occurring. That you really have to focus on what is the right use for AI? What are the business outcomes? Where is it necessary? And make sure that it's being used properly. And so, what we're going to do here is take some of these pieces together and use EA to start talking about the business capabilities. And we've got a couple of ways that we're going to speak to business capabilities. We're going to use them to understand the artificial capabilities that artificial intelligence capabilities that my business requires. And I can also look at business capabilities that could genuinely benefit from artificial intelligence. And a lack of consideration of capabilities is a problem that we see in many transformation elements. There's an older tweet, but I've liked this one because it was so public and so famous. Elon Musk, of course, with Tesla, as he started to automate the manufacturing and really ramp up and scale up delivery, wanted everything to be robots and artificial intelligence itself. And in the end, it failed. And so he had a very famous tweet where he spoke about underestimating the importance and value of humans. And really, what that relates to is he didn't contemplate the capabilities needed to maintain, sustain, implement, and drive the production that he had imagined. In focusing exclusively on the automation and technology, he missed on a number of capabilities necessary to make it all work. So, really looking at that perspective, understanding what the goals are before we talk about how we implement it is one of the ways artificial intelligence can benefit from enterprise architecture. So I think of looking at it as sort of two sides of a coin. We can go through and understand that there's an aspect of the depth of decomposing all of the different capabilities of artificial intelligence that my organization needs and assessing whether or not we have them in order to execute on the strategy. If I'm missing on certain capabilities, I'm not going to be able to achieve the strategic vision that's driven by artificial intelligence if, for example, I don't know how to incorporate the technologies, don't have the right data, whatever it might be. But additionally, I could look at the breadth of capabilities, look at all of the capabilities across the business and see which ones could truly benefit from artificial intelligence, not just as the shiny new thing, but articulated in a business outcome oriented fashion. We're going to enhance a capability, for example, that it changes the experience of the customer in line with modern market expectations. Then I can look at that and say, okay, I can start proposing new products, new services, new delivery mechanisms that utilize artificial intelligence to bolster or change those elements and behaviors. So already enterprise architecture can help articulate the capabilities of AI that we need in the organization to succeed, as well as articulate the business capabilities within the organization that need AI. Now, remember the slide earlier, I spoke to Sam Holtzman and his notion about the AI engines are good, but the data is bad. And so this is really a phenomenal area, in my view, where enterprise architecture can really, really benefit the artificial intelligence initiatives. And that's to understand what data is necessary and what the outcome is we're trying to achieve. And so if I go back to that capability notion of which business capabilities are benefiting or could benefit from AI, what does success look like, the outcome that I would measure, and then what data would be necessary to truly make that AI work in the way that it should. And so I asked ChatGPT, just sticking with the theme of the conversation today, let's go back to the AI itself and say, what about EA for AI? And similar to the answer I got on Hexa, it comes back with data governance and management. So AI does, of course, rely heavily on data. But one of the challenges, if I'm a data scientist trying to organize my artificial intelligence, if I don't know the context of the data that I'm being given or that I can draw from, if I don't know the scope of the data that's available to me, if I don't know the quality of the data, it's going to be really hard, if not impossible, to truly succeed in delivering artificial intelligence that has the value and the quality of result that I expect. So contextualization that architecture gives to the organization, and in this case, in the context, data contextualization, immensely, immensely valuable so that we can understand and really frame the perspective to support AI programs and projects. Now, I did challenge the lead data scientist at Mega. I said, Ava, you are in this role, you're expert in the field. Is this something you agree with because you now work at an architecture company? And she articulated no, she had actually gone through projects in the past, some of which had the contextualization that enterprise architecture offers, and some which didn't. And the ones that didn't were more likely to fail and run into challenges because not knowing where the data came from, for example, or the quality of the data led to failures in the predictions of the models. And so it's absolutely an element of high value that enterprise architects can offer for AI, sorry. Framing business problems in the context of data relates to the previous point. Context, context, context. Connected EA is what we call it at Mega. The ability to understand and align the business perspectives, the IT perspectives, perhaps a regulatory or risk perspective, and then the data perspective across all of it. If I need to know what I'm trying to do and I don't know the information that's available to me, I don't know the degree which I can trust it, then I'm going to have a really hard time. So spend time to understand the context of the problem and then the context of the data so that we can drive forward in the right way. Famous quote from Einstein: if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend 55 minutes to determine the proper question. Comes back to, again, contextualization and framing, business outcome oriented. Enterprise architecture should be business outcome oriented in order to deliver value. Artificial intelligence should be business outcome oriented in order to deliver value. And we can use the experience we have over the last number of decades of moving enterprise architecture in an outcome driven perspective to help guide AI into an outcome driven perspective. And if we collaborate together in articulating the business capabilities needed for AI and the business capabilities and their specific outcomes that would benefit from AI, we can really help frame the direction for bringing artificial intelligence successfully to our organization. And again, in doing so, establish context for the data governance, the data catalogs, so that we can enable the data scientists and those working on AI programs to really understand clearly the problem they're trying to solve and whether they truly have the right visibility technologies and information to make it succeed. All right, those are the things that I was set to speak to today. Of course, I'm happy to discuss any questions if there are any.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, for wonderful insight. Great, great talk, great insights. I already wrote in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Then we will get to it. While we wait on that, Jean, do you have any questions?
Yeah. So I think what I'm interpreting is that AI, or the way we've got it set up with Mega, it can assist in generating designs, visualizations. It can create technical information and certifications, documents. It can automate repetitive tasks. But the takeaway that I got, which by the way was quite impressive, AI lacks the complex human abilities involved in creativity, communication, teamwork, and problem solving. So AI complements EA. It's not going to replace the architect, which is some of the banter that I see out on LinkedIn, where people are like, "Oh, AI is going to replace, architects." So I don't see it replacing it. I see it as a full-on complementary capability.
Yeah, I would say for sure for the time frame. So I'll never say never in the future, right? Who knows what 10, 20, or 50 years will bring. But today, the challenge is that even the best AI, even if it's perfect, and even if the result is perfect, there's still not the trust yet that could be the case. And we know it's not perfect. And so we would have to get that point of demonstrated high level accuracy for some significant duration before there was enough trust to even contemplate sort of the replacement of the architect. We do know that AI can hallucinate, for example. We know that it can come up with odd facts that may or may not be facts. And so we want to make sure that it's providing, from our perspective, the best basis set of data so that we have the highest accuracy, but still leave the final decisions and determinations to the architect. And I think when it's looking at what's best for the organization, you would have to be able to explain to the AI all of the multiple perspectives that an architect contemplates on a day-to-day basis. And the
Yeah.
level of effort that might take, even if it could deliver the best answer, might outweigh the architect just continuing their work. So yes, today for me, augmentation, I think that'll be for, I don't want to put a specific date on it, but for some duration, it's going to be augmentation. And I think that makes sense.
So, and then going back to services, which I think is core for any EA organization when you're standing up, or like I think it was Gartner reported, or someone reported, 87% of the companies right now are revamping their enterprise architecture organizations, which it is a good thing, I assume. But the idea is that AI, when you're revamping, you could use this in the revamping or restructuring of your EA to help with the initial services. You could figure out what are the best services based on your stakeholders, and AI could help define those services, I would think.
Absolutely. It can at least propose ideas, and then
Yeah.
as you select a direction with the ideas, it can help you refine and create greater clarity. It aligns to Peter's comment in the chat about, AI supported EA will essentially succeed greater than non-AI supported EA, and I think that's true because of that augmentation. And so if I am, for example, I'll say a stereotypical architect of 20 years ago, right? Small team, very IT focused, very non-communicative, very introverted in the work, right? So we do things in a kind of a silence on our own. We don't really bounce ideas. Yeah, bubble. There we go. We do all of that. Yeah, and of course that sort of expanded to say, well, let's look outside the bubble. Let's bring it more towards business. Let's focus on value delivery, and now let's augment so that we can do more with the same resources that we have. We can find greater insight. I'm not sure if it's still true today, but a number of years ago, there was a study, and I think it was about reading medical charts and in particular scans of some kind. And it's like the AI was very good at finding a certain style, but the human was very good at finding a different style. But bringing them together, they had the highest accuracy of reading and reviewing the scans and the charts. And I think it's the same here. An architect with some proposed insights from the AI is going to deliver much more value, much more result than those without AI.
Great. It'll be
So we do
interesting,
have, sorry.
service catalogs, like do a snapshot of service catalogs, even with our customers, and then in 3 or 4 years, look at the service catalogs again. I would think we'd see some change.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting perspective for sure. Let me see. There is another question that came through on the chat. Let me
Correct.
see. So the one that looks to be a question is talking about trust and AI using the tools you were talking about. How much of the question, I presume what I typed in terms of the generative AI assistant, is flowing back in the AI data models, and where does it end up? So for that part of the question, that is Mega's generative assistant. So those questions that are asked today do come back to Mega. It's not mixed in with public Chat GPT. It's not going out to the world. So it's our own instance isolated on Azure. And so we're using Microsoft technology in that regard. So it stays with Mega. And then with the questions you used in the session, it might be no-brainer, real business data. So business data is not the questions, yes. And as we roll this out, people are aware. We're communicating to people that the way it's set up. As a matter of fact, when we talk about the generative AI assistant, the first question from clients, of course, is what's the data exposure, what's being shared? And so the questions today are envisioned predominantly about utilization of the product or general value. Then we're looking for ways in which we can integrate it with data in a way that doesn't expose data. So privacy, security, these are huge concerns for Mega. And so we do have some ideas and some models that might be a subsequent presentation we can talk to on how we're looking to solve that issue. I'll give you one quick illustration that we're contemplating. The generative AI assistance being taught on the query language that's in HopeX. It's very SQL-like. It's just object-oriented or graph-oriented, if you will. And so one of the things would be you ask a question of your data. The question gets sent to the generative AI to come up with the query, but the query gets fed back to your local data set and then applied locally so that your data never leaves your controller environment. so that the Q&A would work by sort of translating the question into a query, all behind the scenes, feeding the query back and giving you the answer on your data without sharing your data. So it is huge priority for us to keep privacy going on. Let me see. Those are the questions I see at the moment. I think there's a comment.
Just one more comment regarding that. That's also beyond kind of like Mega using AI. We've seen, and we actually also come up with like some guidelines and some guardrails, I think, where we help our clients. Okay, how can they build like an AI roadmap and guidelines within their organizations to cover right those questions and say, okay, what is a safe usage of AI? So we do not expose our business data to like public models or things that end up then helping a competitor or being a privacy breach or things like that. So there's a couple of like governance to do on AI, and it's also something where tools like Mega help to kind of like assess your application portfolio and then also see in which areas do you want to apply more AI in your applications, where do you want to allow that, where don't you? So it's also something that goes or is part of your EA task to do's, your responsibilities to kind of like help your organization to use AI in responsible ways.
Yeah, and I think in that vein, what I like, and I said it a few times even in the presentation, referring to what you introduced, the kind of the EA as a service notion and leveraging your expertise to fill gaps in EA practices. Jean, you mentioned the kind of reboot of many EA practices. And part of that challenge is that you may get an enthusiastic individual. They may even be super talented in terms of EA, but if they're one person and the team doesn't have the capability to execute in a certain capacity, then they need support, and that could be through hiring, training, but the most rapid way, of course, is not only AI augmentation but expert augmentation to come and fill those gaps. And as AI is still new, even if it's not technologically new, but some of the things that are happening with generative AI and the enthusiasm about adopting it to products is moving so quickly, drawing on that expert direction to help ensure people don't inadvertently deploy something to expose data in a way, like you mentioned, to benefit the competition, or where they set up a solution that maybe the AI is 2 layers deep and not quite visible to the ultimate consumer of that information, who thinks it is vetted business information and really it was from an AI, and now they make a catastrophic decision because of that lack of visibility. So absolutely, the expertise and the guidance you're mentioning, we would strongly support to be sure that people efficiently and effectively navigate without tripping on any particularly huge issues.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. As we're coming actually also to an end here from a time perspective. So if there are no further questions, then thank you so much to all the participants out there. Thank you so much, Jean, for co-hosting this. And the biggest thank you goes to Mega and you, Dan, for giving us all this content, these insights. Really great to see you at the forefront here, and thanks so much.
Yeah, happy to do it. Excited to see everybody. Thank you very much.